That's right, we're back. It's Diablo time again, everybody. The video game version of the band playing on the deck of the Titanic as it goes down. Thank you all for taking a break from looking at the hate conduits on your phone to join us here today. Or maybe that's how you found us. Either way, we're happy to have you. I'm your host, Shanghai Pete, the People's Champion, your good buddy in the mix, and Professor Emeritus of Sophomoric Subversity. We've got a great show for you today, so blaze up and let's get right down to getting deep inside. Once again, let's start off with a quick recap of the week, which was dominated by the disastrous launch of Diablo II Resurrected. Let's face it, nobody expected any better, which of course is no excuse to fumble it as bad as Blizzard did, but nonetheless, it was laughably predictable. Fortunately, I had no part in that because I just grabbed a cart dump of it from my Switch and have been playing it offline. And you know what? It's pretty fucking great, actually. Now, I hear the state of the lobby and other online features are another story altogether, but as purely an offline single-player experience, I'm having a blast with it on my Switch. I love it. And also, to be clear, in case anyone thought for even a moment that perhaps, hey, maybe Blizzard finally did something right, no, I'll set the record straight. No, they did not. The company that actually made D2 Resurrected was Vicarious Visions. The company that completely bungled the launch, that was Blizzard. Moving on, seems the universe has seen fit to bestow upon us all another installment of I Told You So. Now, remember when the Switch OLED was unveiled a little while back instead of the Switch Pro, and I said this? Did they have a different version of this model ready to go with a more modern chip than the Tegra X1 in it, and then bailed at the last second for whatever reason? Maybe they decided they didn't want any part of the current chip shortage nightmare? Possibly. Were they never planning a model that was any different than what we got? I would say that's doubtful. Too many of the leaks said the same things and appeared to have the same sources, so that seems a little unlikely. I'd be willing to bet that they may have had a more powerful model in the works, but just decided to scrap it for the time being. After all, Switch is still selling out everywhere. They've got new Zelda and Metroid in the pipeline, and sales are showing no signs of slowing, so I don't know. Might kind of make sense.
I think so.
Yeah, and then all these other people were like, yo, fuck you Yankee Blue Jeans, bitch. There was never a real Switch Pro. Well, boys, I love to say it. I told you so. Turns out there was. In a recent article, Bloomberg turned up even more evidence that the Switch Pro was real, at least at one point. There's a link to their article down below, but essentially they say that not only was the OLED model initially going to have actual increased performance, i.e. a Switch Pro, but there's even indication of Switch 4K dev kits out in the wild. Now, okay, that's not to say that Nintendo themselves haven't come out fervently denying all this. Of course they have. But if you ask me which I'm going to believe or which sounds more likely to be true, a detailed and extensively sourced report from Bloomberg or a tweet from Nintendo trying to save face in front of their shareholders, I admit this is an anomaly, but I will have to go with Bloomberg in this case. Seems that, just as many of us thought, supply chain issues and a global pandemic made it rather difficult to shit out new video game consoles because fucking of course it did. I don't see how anyone could view that as even a potentially suspect explanation. It makes perfect sense. That didn't stop Sony though, and look how well that's going. The article goes on to state that we shouldn't expect a more powerful Switch until late 2022, and that sounds spot on to me. There's still essentially zero next-gen exclusive games, and the PS5 is certainly not getting any easier to find. So I think Nintendo's calculations in this case most likely correct. OLED model will carry enough hype probably for the next year or so, and by the time people really start getting tired of it, we'll likely have the rumor mill churning out renewed Switch Pro leaks 24/7. And even all that notwithstanding, the Switch is coming up on 5 years old. Eventually, just practically speaking, they're gonna have to come up with at least a revised SoC if they want the Switch to continue as a platform. And yes, I know this isn't necessarily definitive proof, of course, but you know what? I'm gonna take it. Next up, for any of you unfortunate enough to have been paying attention, you will have noticed that there's been even more updates to the clusterfuck of pompous corporate barbarism, better known as the end of Blizzard Entertainment as we know it. Activision's CEO, Big Bobby Kotick, has been subpoenaed, their chief legal officer bailed, and the list of charges in that lawsuit against them climbs ever higher. I don't have any nuanced thoughts on this, and honestly, I doubt any of you care for any of the nauseating details about this, because I definitely don't. So I'm not going to go over them here. There's plenty of detailed coverage on that out there already if you're, masochistic enough to seek it out. All I have to say about this is that you'll have to see it. There's a gun to Blizzard's proverbial head, and they've been given a choice. Make better games or kill yourself. So, I guess it's bye-bye Blizzard. 10 years ago, this would have been devastating. Now, not so much. Moving on, it looks like there's been some to-do about a potential Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. And that's not all. Apparently, the rumor that Kojima is working on a new Silent Hill game to revive the franchise has been regurgitated yet again, and even Konami now has come down from their shrine on the hill to tease about a possible reimagining of Castlevania. Guys, just no. Please, okay, just stop. I realize that hollowing out and defiling the proud corpses of once great IPs and franchises in the name of cannibalistic disaster capitalism is kind of the thing to do nowadays, but please, for fuck's sake, just leave me out of it. MGS3 is almost a perfect 10 game. It does not need a remake. Like, we really need to tell them that, they know that. Silent Hill hasn't been good since Silent Hill 3, which came out almost 20 fucking years ago. Sidebar, there definitely is an argument to be made for Silent Hill 4, but it wasn't really my jam either way. Anyways, Silent Hill can't just be revived at this point. It's not a patient in a coma that just needs to be woken up. It's a corpse. And forgive me if the idea of someone fucking it back to life to make a little money isn't appealing to me. And Castlevania? Lords of Shadow was the last time that franchise showed even a flicker of life, and it was a highly dubious one at that. Personally, I love Lords of Shadow, but it wasn't what I'd call unanimously well received, and I don't think I even need to mention its sequel. Bloodstained is the new Castlevania. That's what people want. What they don't want is Konami's filthy hands on literally anything that used to be good. Put the Castlevania down and just slowly back away. Now, for our main story tonight, I thought it'd be fun to just kind of chill and chop it up about some games that are awesome. First up is Tales of Arise, because much to my shock, it's fucking awesome. I've been a fan of the Tales series since the first time I played Tales of Destiny for PS1 in like 99 maybe. I fell in love with the first few entries in the series. I have long held the position that the first three were by far the best. The first one, Tales of Fantasia, initially a Japanese only release for Super Nintendo. The second, Tales of Destiny for PS1, and the third, also for PS1, called Tales of Eternia in Japan, but renamed Tales of Destiny 2 when it was localized here in the States. I'll give honorable mentions to Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Legendia, and Tales of Symphonia because they were all decent games in their own right, but to me it's the first three, Fantasia, Destiny, and Eternia, that were the real soul of the series. And since Symphonia, that soul has barely been present at all. More recent entries like Xillia, Berseria, etc., like not terrible games by any means, but man, they just did not do it for me. So I've been waiting ever since Symphonia for the series to return to its glory days, so to speak. Every time a new entry was announced, I get all hyped up and, of course, eventually disappointed. So to say I was skeptical about Tales of Arise would be an understatement, but as it turns out, holy shit, it's awesome. I'm almost 40 hours in right now and having a great time. Is it the second coming of Tales of Eternia? Sadly, no, it's definitely not, but it is a lot of fun. Combat system is fantastic, even if the enemies tend to be a little bit too tanky overall, and the story, for once, doesn't feel completely contrived or absurd, just a little bit. Even the English voice acting, which I hardly ever use over the original Japanese when it's available, is pretty good. Gorgeous art style, great combat, engaging script, and believable characters and writing. I'd give Tales of Arise a solid 7.5, a must-have for any JRPG fan these days. Let's talk a little bit more about Diablo II Resurrected next. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's awesome. Full disclosure though, I was not a D2 purist by any means or like a fanatic. I'm not even that crazy about ARPGs in general. I mean, I like them, sure, but it's far from a favorite genre of mine or even a genre I know that much about. I played Grim Dawn, Path of Exile, Torchlight 2, 40k Inquisitor, all the original Diablos, that kind of stuff, and I've enjoyed them all, but I'm far from an expert or even really good at them for that matter. But I do fuck with them, especially when they're well done. And D2 is fucking well done. Just like WoW Classic, there's a reason certain games have the enduring legacy and audience that they do, even after decades in some cases. Now, you may not personally fuck with some of them, but don't make the mistake of dismissing them or thinking their design theory or overall quality can be argued. It simply cannot. In my view, Diablo 2 falls into that category. Is it dated in many ways, especially from a modern perspective? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Certainly quality of life stuff, it's limited movement grid, a lot of the multiplayer implementation, etc., but it's still awesome. In fact, that it succeeds in spite of those things just further emphasizes my point. So is it a Path of Exile killer, a serious threat to D4, or even any sort of ARPG renaissance? No, not at all. But it is pretty fucking cool. 8 out of 10. Next up, it's Metroid Time. No, not Metroid Dread. I'm talking about AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake. If you've never heard of it, AM2R is a fan remake of Metroid 2 Return of Samus for Game Boy. Now, while I do think that Nintendo's version called Samus Returns, or Return of Samus, whatever it was, for 3DS is good, this is better. Of course, it was narked with a DMCA by good old daddy Nintendo shortly after it came out in 2016, but fortunately, you can still find it if you know where to look. Even more awesome, though, is that it was recently ported to Switch using the Game Maker Studio 2 engine, and you can find it as an NSP if your Switch is jailbroken. Both the Switch and the original PC versions are still being updated incredibly, and I can't recommend it enough. It's fucking fantastic. 9 out of 10. Moving on, in case some of you didn't know, there was a Quake re-release last month. I'm not going to go into all the myriad ways that Quake is a fucking insanely awesome classic. At this point, you either fuck with it or you don't. For those of you that don't, this recent port, it's not going to change your mind. But for those of you that do, you gotta play it. Not only has it been finally officially ported for like a modern implementation, but it comes with a whole new episode by Machine Games called Dimension the Machine, which is sick as fuck. I've been playing the shit out of this recently. Quake, of course, it's 10 out of 10. Perfect. Next up is Resident Evil Village and Cyberpunk 2077. Yes, I know how a lot of you guys feel about these, and I also know that some of you didn't exactly take too kindly to my takes on them. That's cool, you're never gonna agree with every single opinion someone has, it's not a big deal. But yo, for better for worse, guys, I love Resident Evil Village and I love Cyberpunk 2077. And even if you think you won't, I encourage you to give them a shot because I had a fuck ton of fun playing them and I feel that they're great games. I won't go into all that again here, but regardless, if you feel like giving either one of them a shot, you can find my reviews for them right here in the little boxes that pop up. All right, cool. Hopefully I didn't lose too many of you guys with that. Next, perhaps surprisingly, perhaps not, I think another great game is the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Yes, that's right. Quick sidebar. Bear in mind that unless I mention specifically otherwise, I'm referring to the PC version of a game, as I am in this case. Regardless of how you feel about the ending, the Mass Effect trilogy is practically an institution of modern RPG gaming, and for good reason. These games are just as awesome now as they were when they were first released. The remastered versions, especially in HDR and PC, look gorgeous, and a lot of the retexture ideas were even inspired directly from one of the biggest and most beloved fan mods out there, so that's fucking sick too. I originally played these games on a 360, but the updated PC controls are fantastic. The game looks awesome in 4K. The Legendary Edition also includes about 40 of the original DLC single-player stuff, so that's dope too. If you're an RPG fan and somehow missed these the first time around, or even if you've already played through all three multiple times, the Legendary Edition is super sick, and I recommend it. A 7 out of 10, boy. Moving on, we next come to The Ascent. I think I might be a little late on this one, actually, as I only got around to firing it up a couple weeks ago, but holy fucking shit is it badass. I don't know how it does it, but somehow it feels like it's almost better looking than Cyberpunk 2077, which itself is fucking gorgeous. Great combat systems here. The gameplay loop, while not particularly innovative really, is engaging, has a lot of fun quirks like the melee options and the additional abilities you can equip with different items. The talent point / skill tree is also great. Nothing special, but very competent. It does what any good version of those systems should do, which is that it manages to offer a good amount of diversity while still feeling like your choices actually affect your moment-to-moment gameplay. And like I said, visually, it's fucking stunning. I love a game that actually shows your new armor and gear on your character model, so of course I'm all about that here, but more importantly, it does away with something that I almost always hate about so many ARPGs. There's no procedurally generated areas. Every inch of each area was handcrafted and it shows. No zooming out and having your immersion broken by obvious tiling. Thank God. I understand why so many of those type of games do that, but it makes every location just feel so artificial, and I love that The Ascent does not do that. It's not perfect, of course. The quest tracking system and map are kind of boof and can be annoying at times, plus the gun variety doesn't seem great, but overall, I'm loving this game so far. 7 out of 10, easy. Next, let's briefly talk about The Medium. Released back in January, I'm surprised we didn't hear more on this one. It's sort of a stealth puzzler horror game. It's not really survival horror, I guess, but still vaguely in the spirit of old Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. My favorite part about this is the return of fixed camera angles. It cannot be overstated how awesome it is. I love that it's back and The Medium makes an insanely compelling case to keep them around. There's just so much more you can do in terms of tension building and atmosphere by taking control of the camera shots away from the player. It won't be for everyone, of course, but I fucking love this one. Super bugged out and almost photorealistic at times. The design and storytelling in this game are really something special. I absolutely recommend it. 9 out of 10. Lastly, rounding out this list is of course a retro indie FPS. You knew I wasn't going to let y'all get away without mentioning at least one of these. And the one we're talking about today is Dread Templar by T19 Games. This one's got it all. Super dope weapons, insane difficulty spikes, retro-inspired gameplay and graphics, plus a sick, almost industrial electro soundtrack right up my motherfucking alley, bitch. There's even a cool skill system here which injects some kind of meaningful choice elements into the retro FPS formula, which is awesome. I love it when these type of devs take little, often subtle risks like that with the gameplay. I think it's currently in early access right now, but you can grab it off Steam for like $15 or off your favorite torrent tracker for free. As always with indie games, I do encourage you guys to spend the dough on this one, but of course, I know fuck all about your individual financial situation, so if you can't afford it, by all means, torrent this hoe. The important thing is that if you like Quake or Doom style FPSs, especially if you fuck with the retro FPS sort of revival scene that's popped up recently, man, play this bitch, it's sick as fuck. 9 out of 10, Okay, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. We love you today. We love you all the way. Hope you enjoyed today. Remember, we're going to tell you what's good, even when most stuff is bad. Especially when most stuff is bad, actually. If you guys have any suggestions or just want to let everyone else know what games you're having fun with, drop in the comments down below. We can always use more dope shit. In any case, we really do love you all. Thanks again for spending this little bit of your free time here tonight. We'll see you again next week for another episode of the Trauma Club that we like to call Degreelessness.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out, huh? Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down.